Man, these readings are off the chart. They're so high that the screen on the meter is turning red. It's just going nuts. I would sure hate to live up here with all this buzzing and transmitting. It is no wonder that the hairs in my arms stand up when I come up here. This is not a good place to hang out. I'm heading up this rough road to the top of the mountain to get to the cell towers. So what's the deal with 5G? Is it harmful, helpful, or what's the agenda with 5G? Well, I'm going to discuss this with you, the average person. But before we get started, my name is Shawn. I have a background in tech, and on this channel we talk about AI and AI's effect on humanity, as well as other topics. Now, I've been coming up to the top of this mountain. It's not too far from my house, but I've been coming up here for probably 20 years. I don't come up here often, but when I was on the fire department for 10 years as an EMT and assistant fire chief, sometimes this whole mountaintop would freeze over and there would be ice on everything, and our emergency radios would shut down. So we had all these car accidents out on Interstate 40, and we couldn't communicate with each other, or the ambulance, or the helicopters. We just could not talk to each other. This is back before other systems came into play. But I used to have to come up here in the middle of winter in super deep snow on an ATV, and a lot of times I'd get it stuck 3/4 of the way up the mountain. And I used to climb that tower right there. That tower is where the fire department has its repeater antenna. And so I had to climb up there on that skinny thing, and then that thing sticking off to the side there, tried to point my finger at it, that thing right there was our fire department repeater antenna. The other main antenna, that's sheriff department. But I've been coming up here, and you know what I've noticed even when I come up in the summer is this place is buzzing, and the hair stands up on my arm. There's a lot of EMF here. There's a lot of stuff going on. And, you know, I just wanted to talk about 5G with you in a place like this. And as you can see, I got a big behemoth one right there, and then more things over there. But not every single thing is cell towers. Some things are just broadcasting. And also, the one for the behemoth, it's got a thick concrete building to house all the electronic equipment. So I'm going to talk to you guys and try to withhold too much of the geek speak. And the reason for that is because I know my average viewer is my age or older. In fact, a lot of people are in their 60s and 70s who watch me, and they don't know all this tech talk. So any of you guys who want to correct me on the geek speak, you have to understand I'm talking to actual everyday people. Now, I'm going to start with a thought for you guys, especially you older people. Do you guys remember back before FM radio? Personally, I can't remember before it. I was born in 1970. But there was a time when the only radio that was really broadcast was AM radio. And then FM came, and AM was a lower frequency. And frequency is just basically these invisible radio waves that are sent out and in a signal, and the signal for AM is like this, and then FM was like this, and then later we started getting other things such as cell phones and things like that. You guys remember your cordless phones too. The original cordless phones for your home, we'd hold these big old things with an antenna on it. The original ones had a lower frequency, and then as the technology progressed, they had a higher frequency. Now, here's why I'm telling you this, because the lower the frequency, the further the wave can travel. That is why, do you guys remember sometimes in the middle of the night or the early morning hours, you could pick up radio stations from a long way away? You know, and then when the sun comes out, everything goes back to normal, and you're picking up all your local radios, AM radio stations. But I remember being in Minnesota and getting reception of a radio station in Oklahoma City, which is really far away. And that is because AM is able to travel very, very far. And as we increase these frequencies, and right now we're at 5G, the waveform, instead of being big, is just really, really minuscule. So what the side effect of that is that the transmission distance is not as far. So now I'm going to get right to phones. We had 1G, 2G, 4G recently, and now we're at 5G. Now, 4G only got up to gigahertz, maybe 5 gigahertz or less. And now they've introduced 5G, which can have gigahertz as high as 24. But I'm going to talk to you about 5G and really what is going on. Now, 5G has been implemented, but a lot of it hasn't, because when I was telling you guys that 5G cannot transmit as far as 4G and earlier frequencies. And the reason this is important for you guys to know is because they have to put up towers everywhere. It used to be we could have towers like wherever it went. Oh, there it is. We could have a few towers like this up on the hilltop on the mountain, and that would do. That would cover a lot of area, including rural areas. Now that they came out with 5G, they're finding out that it doesn't reach as far. They knew this. And so they're going to have to put 5G antennas and towers everywhere. And when I say everywhere, I mean in a typical city, there can be upwards over 100 of these towers just within a city. There could be hundreds of towers within a city. And so they're trying to provide all this coverage, but the distance is short, and the 5G is not able to penetrate walls or go through foliage like trees very well. And so we're having a side effect of 5G, and that is, before we had a few towers and that did the trick, and now we've got to have thousands of them. In fact, over 100,000 of them were put up in the last few years in the United States alone. Now, a tower or a 5G tower or relay or whatever, every single one of those things takes electricity. It produces radio frequency at a close distance, and it creates heat. For those of you guys don't know, the more power you put into something, the more heat it creates. So we've got some kind of side effects there as far as the towers are concerned. But I wanted to also kind of discuss with you any other possibilities that are going on with 5G. Now, I have dug into the 5G thing and found that there was sort of an agenda to go ahead and put in all of this 5G in a hurry. But what we found is that our capabilities, our improvement in speeds and everything, 5G is capable of doing 1,000 times more data than the 4G But we're finding out that there's really not that much 5G around, because everything is kind of having to fall back on 4G because of the distance problem and other things. There's other issues, such as some people's devices might say 5G, but they really aren't receiving anything in 5G. And so what I found is that there was a agenda, and it was really at first pushed more by profit than anything. But I'm going to get into the second nefarious part of this 5G. But the profit part, when they have an idea like this, and all of a sudden it becomes this arms race. I mean, they were talking about, we got to win the 5G race. Why were they doing that if it's not that much better than 4G? Well, it had to do with profit. And a lot of these cell phone carriers and people, the companies like that, they lobbied Congress like crazy, to where Congress people were talking out their butt and saying, we need to win this 5G race. And they didn't even know what they were talking about. But that's how well lobbyists work in this country. But make no mistake, guys, there's something more to it than just the profit. The profit is the vehicle which is used to rapidly advance something. But why are they rapidly advancing something? It's not just, okay, so the people that are wanting the profit, that's one thing. But the whole idea of having towers everywhere has to do with, they want redundancy. And when I say they, I'm talking about, there is a plan in place to have total control over people. This is underlying all of this stuff. And so the ones who want total control over all people, they have to set up this network. And this network has to have redundancy. In other words, if weather takes something out, or a person sabotages one of these towers, the other ones can fill in. Put so many of these things out there that there's no way they could take them all down, because they're everywhere. That's the first part of it. The second part of it is they want these things everywhere for the end result, which is really to control people. I'm hearing some weird noises coming out of these things. Sorry, it just sounds weird. So this is where this plan also connects with the whole AI push. There is an agenda with the AI. That's why it's not even regulated. That's why any attempt to regulate AI has failed, because the powers behind all of that are way too powerful for any one person to stand up, or even a group of lawmakers cannot stand up against what is going on. So now mix in 5G with AI, and all of a sudden we've got a complete transformation of our society and everything. And as you can see right now, I've been talking about AI for quite a while and how disruptive it's going to be. And I had many people just kind of not take me seriously. How do you feel now? But AI is going to be everywhere. For those of you who are trying to avoid AI completely, it's not really going to be possible. And I got to watch my step on this. Is what's called a cattle guard. Got to step on it carefully without falling through. So I'm telling you guys that this infrastructure that is being put in place right now is all connected. I know it's going to sound weird to some of you guys, but it is all connected. And not too far in the future they will come out with 6G. So I'm talking about 5G, but 5G will be replaced by 6G, and 6G may not be a whole lot better. 6G may just require a lot more towers than 5G did. So instead of hundreds of thousands of them, we could end up with millions of them. And this goes for anywhere in the world. Now, what I'm going to also mention is that there are what I believe to be some possible environmental effects. Now, a lot of studies have been done to determine whether holding a cell phone up to your head is frying your brain. And so far, they've determined that it's either not, because the amount of radiation and EMF coming out of it is just like standing near your microwave oven or whatever. They're calling it negligible. But when I was looking into these studies, I am very suspicious of who paid for these studies and how complete they were. But as of yet, I have no proof that these cell phones are actually causing people cancer, because there's a lot of things at play in a person's body besides EMF, radiation. There's also the food we eat and the poisons out there. But here's what I do believe. Now, this is something that just hasn't been proven, but this is just Shawn thinking here logically. I have really thought for a long time that these things are messing with nature, especially migrating birds and bees. They have done some studies on these and found that they have been affected. Bees are not finding their way back to the hive, and migrating birds are not finding their way back to the nesting ground. But I am not excluding the fact that there are other, and the wind's kind of starting to pick up here, top of the mountain to you. There are other factors besides just these radio frequencies. I'll go, let me get over here. There are other factors besides radio frequencies that affect the bees, the birds, and that is pesticides are affecting both the bees and the birds, heavily the honeybees. And the other thing is that there has been a lot of change in the weather. I'm not talking climate change. I'm talking about there is something going on with the weather patterns, and it's also messing with the migrating birds because they're not knowing what season it is sometimes. But on this episode, I'm talking about 5G, and 5G is a stepping stone to what is coming next. What is coming next is even more of these things put everywhere. And don't underestimate the redundancy factor where they're trying to have as many of these as possible so that they cannot be taken out. And I'm driving around here and I'm like, holy moly, bunch of nails laying everywhere. I'm gonna have nails in my tires. That's not good. Toss these over here. That's right, I tossed them over in the rocks. So, tell me what you guys think about 5G and all that. I've noticed in our rural area, years ago, our cell service was really good and really strong. And then when they introduced 4G, it went downhill really drastically. And then 5G, it's pathetic. It's really bad out here. However, isn't that a good thing? So the good and bad about the rural part of this is that rural people can kind of get away from all this stuff. But the bad thing is those in charge want to put cell towers everywhere. And I would not be surprised if they want to put them everywhere, including the jungles in Amazon, the rainforest. I mean, I can imagine them putting these things everywhere. How's that going to affect everything? You know, they're doing this stuff and selling it to everybody like this is technological advancement. This is good. Everyone's going to love it. You're going to be able to download a movie like that and watch it. And then they said things like, we can do surgeries, robotic surgeries from across the globe with this new 5G. Well, it's not everything it's been hyped up to be. But underneath it all is the agenda. And the agenda sure doesn't favor or like rural people. The agenda is almost trying to force all of us into the cities or near them. But I refuse to go. I have lived out here in the sticks, we call it the sticks, for a long time. I think 20 something years. I don't know how long, but I've always lived out in the country. I like it. I've had to live in cities before, but I don't like city. And you know what I don't like about cities? Noise and people. I do love people. I do like people, and I am concerned about people, but man, I don't like to put up with their crap. So I'm just as well being out by myself. But, you know, when it comes to 5G, I was telling you guys, it has limitations on where it can go. So anybody who's in dense woods, a lot of trees, canyons, things like that, you guys know as soon as you get in there, you have almost no cell service. And that is because those waves cannot make it through that. All right, tell me what you guys think about that. And I'm going to turn around to give you this view. I came up this mountain, and it's approximately 1,000 feet from where I started at the bottom of it down this road. But the view up here is really amazing. So I'm going to end with the view. I'm going to show you this. Let's get on over here on these rocks here. Ugh. All right. That over there, far distance, is historic Route 66. That was the place where it was the coast-to-coast highway. It was the nostalgic highway where people in the 40s, 50s, 60s get in their cars and they would just be going down there. And that ended in our area in about 1977 when they put in Interstate 40, and then Route 66 died off. But it is out there. And there's a preserved section of Route 66 out there where even to this day, classic car clubs get in their cars and they all go down that, and it's really cool to see. And then they go into town to the old 50s diners. How cool is that? All right, guys, as in 5G, remember, for everything we gain, there is something lost. See you later.